advance their work.
Well, Dario, as we mentioned previously, we're going to be watching some PvP games today. Now, it's been a little while since you played Protoss, so how are those Protoss skills these days?
Well, I specifically prepared for the match playing Protoss. I played about 100 games of Protoss prior to the matches I played, and it's not on pro level, but it would probably still be in the top 1 percentile of all players on the planet. So it's decent, just not professional.
Okay.
Okay, and what kind of mindset did you have coming into this? What types of expectations? You're asked to play, maybe not your main race, but you're still a professional gamer. What were you thinking coming into this match?
I saw the video at BlizzCon showing off what the agent can do, or at least giving a little bit of a glimpse, and I was extremely confident from seeing that because it wasn't much. There wasn't much time between BlizzCon and the matches I played in.
All right, and what about DeepMind? Did you guys have an opinion on how this would go? Was it just kind of a shot in the dark? Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, for us, it was very exciting just to get someone of his skill level, even though he was obviously playing his off race, and just seeing him sit down and just getting ready and seeing the kind of amazing skills when when you see these professional gamers to play first, they really play very quickly. So that was extremely exciting. I was super unsure what would happen. I definitely knew we would probably see some interesting games, but my confidence was not great, I must say. Yeah.
Okay. And Tim, how about you? What were you thinking when you hear, okay, TLO is going to be playing Protoss. He's a Zerg player normally. What do you know about it? What were you thinking?
Well, to me, the question in my mind was, is this AI agent going to be at an extreme? Is it going to be extremely cheesy? Is it going to be extremely turtley? Is it going to play completely unlike a human being? I had no idea.
All right. Well, we're about to get into the first replay. I know that that's what everyone wants to see. And Tim, we're going to be saying goodbye to you during that. So any final thoughts for you on this night?
I am so excited to see the outcome of these games, but also so impressed by what the DeepMind team has accomplished.
All right. Well, that's well said. We are just about ready to get into that replay now. We want to remind you of a few things. Rotterdam and I have not seen these games. There are 5 games that were played. We are going to watch 2 of TLO's games. These games were picked because they're entertaining and they show something strategically that's interesting. Of course, we don't know what that is yet. Now, as far as the rest of the games go, we will talk about them a little bit, and all the replays will be released on the website after the show. So you will be able to check those out. And I guess it's time to get into that game with our wonderful observer, Mapu, Kevin Kremser. Let's do it.
All right, then. I'm so incredibly excited.
Oh, my God.
Like you've said multiple times, a lot of people here, they've seen this. We have no idea. I can't wait to really break down some PvP. Once again, guys, this was played on the BlizzCon patch, but that's still a very recent patch. So we have loaded into Catalyst. All the games will be played on Catalyst. All the games will be Protoss versus Protoss, but then I can't wait. Obviously, we're looking at the main base of Liquid's TLO right now, but I want to see that other main base.
Yes. So this is Alpha Star. This is an AI that we don't know how good it is yet. And we'll go over some of the fine details of the game, but already we have some interesting things happening for a Protoss versus Protoss. You notice that up here, TLO is making buildings right at that small choke point, that small ramp. This is a tactic that we use in Protoss vs. Protoss to make kind of a wall so that your opponent can't get into your base. But Alpha Star is skipping that altogether.
There are very few Protosses in Europe that don't wall off. I like to think that I'm one of them. Now, what you guys may ask yourself, what's the benefit of not walling off? Technically, you save a little bit of money. Like, you save a few resources, because whoa, that's a lot of probes, by the way, just chasing around. This is not optimal gameplay, I think, Dan.
No, not
that's
yet.
quite a few probes. I mean, technically, you can say it's scouting, but that's a lot of probes bouncing around, and at the highest level of StarCraft 2, we like to think that we're all very efficient and very clean with our build orders. So every probe that can be gathering resources early on, It's very worried about cannon rushes, it seems like.
Yes. Yeah, and a cannon rush is kind of a very aggressive early game strategy that could be used against it, but TLO, we can see, is not going for anything like that. Now, in the meantime, we have all these probes. They're just kind of gathering resources, minerals and gas, to build these buildings so they can build units to get out on the map, to control area, much like any board game that you might see. But it's just, I'm so interested right now because I see, for instance, TLO is making 2 adepts.
Yep.
And this is the main reason why you'll make a wall at your ramp, so that those adepts can't come in and start to destroy your probes.
Nope. Even though the Alpha Star has created kind of a nice sim city, right? There's a little bit of a circle around the mineral line, so you can say that the workers are somewhat protected. In general, especially since TLO used double chrono boost, that's an ability of the Nexus, which makes you build units a little bit quicker. In a regular game, if we are casting this in a normal way, we say that these 2 adepts of TLO are guaranteed to kill 8-9 workers. And in StarCraft 2 terms, that means that you are incredibly far ahead. If you can pick off that many workers of your opponent early on, you are going to be very far ahead.
Well, right now we see the adepts using their shade ability to get in here and start attacking probes. You see that TLO is already eliminating some of these workers. Now, Alpha Star is trying to target them down as best as he can, but this is pretty significant damage, I would say.
I must say this is a really interesting exchange, because even though Dario was able to pick off 4 or 5 probes there, which we normally say is a very big deal, you could say that the maximum amount of workers that you want to have on your minerals in this phase in the game is 16, maybe 18. Alpha Star technically still has that, at least. It's mining a little less gas, but when it comes to mining minerals, it's still mining more than enough, and it did pick off 2 adepts. So I wouldn't say it's the greatest start for Alpha Star. I don't think it's the cleanest or most optimal start, but it's also not game over by any means.
Yeah, its balancing of the economy is very interesting because, for instance, there's only 2 workers on gas on one of these geysers, 3 is optimal. And, you know, Alpha Star is skipping that. TLO comes in again, is harassing more of those probes, killing them off. And, I mean, I feel like it's a good position right now for TLO overall.
Yep, but it seems like his units are a little bit out of position to keep these 2 up. Look at the micro from Alpha Star. You're actually getting quite some damage done. I mean, that evens up the score at least.
Well, the worker count we can see at the bottom right now, it's 24 workers for TLO and 25 for Alpha Star. So overall, I guess Alpha Star has recovered from the early game.
Yep. Normally losing 10 probes in a 4-minute and 25-second game, that's way too many. We'll say that that's too much damage. That's not, you know, you're not supposed to take that much damage. But this game is not over by any means. As we saw, Alpha is also going for the robotics facility, is getting a Warp Prism. This Warp Prism is going to allow Alpha to be aggressive on the other side of the map and should be able to pull off some pretty nice micro, I assume.
Yes. Now, this strategy in particular is really, really micro intensive, as you said. You have to control your units just very precisely, which we've already seen that Alpha Star is quite good at. You're going to be kind of juggling stalkers, these big long-range shooting units in and out of the Warp Prism, trying to dodge taking damage and doing damage to your opponent in the meantime.
I love how Alpha is truly respecting the Oracle as well. It's like, knows there is an Oracle out, we'll just leave a couple stalkers at home, but at the same time still try to make something happen on the other side of the map. And this is actually kind of scary for TLO because, yeah, Phoenix is about to come out soon, but once again, this Warp Prism is going to allow Alpha to micro these units incredibly well. And, I mean,
well, so far the micro's good. It's not like perfect micro that we're watching at the moment, but look at this. Getting backwards, kind of kiting everything with these stalkers, some good juggling going on. That Warp Prism's still alive, though very low on health.
Yeah, a couple of Stalkers are very low on health as well. Nice pickup there on the Oracle. So both air units went down for TLO, but still has an expand. Is still trading out quite decently, I would say, in the middle of the map. But if you take a look at the army supply, the army of Alpha Star is actually quite a bit bigger now. Obviously, we left 4 or 5 units on the other side of the map.
Yeah.
So those units can technically join for the next push, and since the shield battery went down for TLO as well, this can actually get a little bit dicey.
You're quite right. Even though TLO right now has an economic advantage having 2 bases to 1, I don't know that he's going to be able to hold this assault from Alpha Star.
I think this is maybe a moment where you can see that TLO is not a natural Protoss player, because I think the start was good for TLO, and I think there was time to be ready for this. it's still not over, but the army of TLO is very small compared to the army of AlphaStar.
Yeah, the TLO is in a dire position right now. These stalkers just going in and out, dodging all the damage that TLO is trying to give to him and kind of choosing when to take these battles. It feels to me like so far these attacks have been very well planned by AlphaStar.
And they're relentless. Does not stop. I mean,
No.
Tim said he was worried that perhaps the AlphaStar was going to be incredibly turtly. Well, it seems like the opposite.
Yeah.
Turtling is a term we use for a player that just never attacks. I think it's safe to say that the AlphaStar is the opposite. It loves to attack.
Well, that is it. The GG is called. The good game here from TLO. And the first game from AlphaStar against a pro gamer goes to AlphaStar. Before we get into that too much, I do need to introduce our new guest up here at the desk. We have Dave Silver, co-lead of the AlphaStar program here at DeepMind. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, the pleasure is truly mine and Roddy's, okay? Because we just watched an AI beat TLO, a legendary pro gamer. Please talk to us about this. What is going on here? How did this happen?
Well, this is, of course, an exciting moment for us. We have a team that's been working on this and ramping up our development over the last few months, and this represents a milestone where we actually, for the first time, saw an AI that was actually able to defeat a professional player.
TLO, what were you kind of thinking as you played this very first pro match against AlphaStar?
So I started the match very confidently, especially when I saw those probes in the natural. I thought, okay, this is not right. You know, something odd is going on here. I thought, too, it was very worried about cannon rush. And I must admit, I feel I should have won that match, but made a lot of mistakes because I'm not used to being a Protoss player. Mm-hmm. But even though I lost the first map, I was still very confident because it was a one-base push. You know, you can lose to that, but I felt like I would be very prepared in the next matches.
Well, the micro in that push seemed very, very strong, and I'm sure something that all the people at home are wondering, all the StarCraft2 players at least, is what kind of speed does AlphaGo have? Can we talk about that a little bit? We measure speed in APM, actions per minute in StarCraft. So can you guys speak to it a bit?
Yeah, that's right. So we thought a lot about fairness and trying to make a system, make AlphaStar in a way where it would actually play the game fairly and not just kind of win the game by playing an insane number of clicks or playing in a way that a human just simply couldn't. So one of the ways in which you measure how fast a player is able to play the game is by these actions per minute, these APMs that you mentioned. And what we see here is actually the number of APMs that both AlphaStar and a human pro like TLO will actually use in a game. Mm-hmm. And what we see is that there's often times where it's necessary to actually use more APMs or fewer APMs, but the overall AlphaStar actually used considerably fewer APMs than TLO or a human pro would in this kind of situation. And so that indicates that actually it's not just winning this game by clicking insanely, but actually by doing something much smarter than that.
Yeah, and I do have to mention, you know, as a longtime StarCraft analyst, that's not a particularly high APM that we're seeing from AlphaStar. So very impressive indeed. And
on top of that, it's probably worth mentioning as well that actually, you know, there's another real factor here, which is whether AlphaStar is playing with like a superhuman reaction time. But actually, we measured how quickly it reacts to things. So if you actually measure the time from when AlphaStar actually perceives the game, when it actually observes what's going on, and then it has to think about it, kind of processes it with its neural network, and ultimately communicates the action that it chooses back to the game, that actual time length, that kind of reaction time, is around 350 milliseconds, which is, again, actually really on the kind of low side, the slow side for compared to human pros.
Wow. Well, I mean, it's very impressive that it's playing that well. That I do have one more question as to kind of the fairness of it. How is AlphaStar actually looking at the game?
So if we think about how AlphaStar actually perceives the game, it's very much as if it's kind of zoomed out so that it could see the whole map at once. And so if you think about it, you know, what it's actually able to see is kind of depicted here in this kind of video. And AlphaStar is able to zoom out and see all of its own units at once, including all of their attributes such as health or shields. But in addition, it gets to see any enemy units which are not, which are actually visible. In other words, they're actually not obscured by fog of war and they're not invisible. So anything which can be seen by a human player if they were to move their camera to that position, all of that information is available to AlphaStar straight away, given this kind of zoomed out sense of the game. So you might say, well, humans, when they play the game, they actually have to do something additional, which is to manage something which pro players call their economy of attention. They have to think about where they're going to click and where they're going to focus the camera on. And that's an important part of the game, to decide where to focus their camera and what they're going to see. So what we actually did was we analyzed how Alpha Star actually plays the game as well. And what we saw was that internally, even though it's seeing things in this kind of zoomed out view, it's actually having to manage something similar with this kind of implicit focus of attention. And what we did was we measured that focus of attention, and we saw that it actually changes that focus of attention and sees about 30 different screens per minute, which is actually very similar to a typical number that human pros would use.
Now, I've got one big question. Something that we see, obviously, very often in professional StarCraft 2 is if we are playing a best of 5, or in this case, a 5-game series, we adapt. Like, if we lose a game, we will not necessarily go with the same strategy. If we win, we also may not necessarily go with the same strategy because you don't want to become too predictable. Does AlphaStar have this thought process as well? Like, will it do the same build again because it won game 1, or can we expect something else?
So we'll have a more clear explanation, hopefully, in the next few minutes. But what I would say about that is that currently AlphaStar actually doesn't care about what happened in the games. So in a way, it's playing sort of the 5 games independently.
Okay.
And obviously, it is true that as a human, and I myself played, there's a lot of kind of mindset that you get into if you've lost, won, and so on the games. And what we're seeing here in AlphaStar, it does not do that.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to go into the next replay pretty soon, but that's actually going to be of game 3 of 5. We're skipping game 2. Again, it's going to be posted on the blog of DeepMind after the show. But TL, can you quickly run us through what game 2 was like?
So because the way game 1 went down, I felt very confident that I just need to play a clean defensive game, and that I should easily defeat the agent that I thought I was with Tim there a little bit. Oh, it looks like it's just going to be the ultimate cheese machine that is just going to do risky one-base all-ins, because that's straightforward. That's how humans started playing the game. So maybe that's how AlphaStar started playing the game. And I played very defensive, and then it basically played Turtle into a weird one Stargate fleet beacon with carriers, and it never attacked until it basically had 200 supply carrier army, and I managed to almost come back by just killing all the interceptors with Archons. But then it just had 15 carriers with 3/3 upgrades, and eventually I just lost the carrier versus carrier game.
So 0-2, Dario?
Wow. Wow. Well, I am very excited to see what is in game number 3. So let's go ahead and get into that replay and see what other strategies AlphaStar has in store for us.
That's amazing.
That is amazing.
Mass carriers. Why not? The complete opposite of game 1.
Yes.
Well, I guess that
you
answers
couldn't
that.
get further.
Yeah.
Wow.
I guess that answers that question as well. All right, we have loaded into the third game of this 5-game series, as this time in the right bottom side of Catalyst. We're looking in the main base of Liquid TLO.
And in the top left, we have AlphaStar. Once again, of course, we already kind of went over this. It doesn't look like it wants to wall in at its ramp, so, kind of has that open main base.
Now, I think there are ways that you can get away with not walling off at the ramp. We went over that a little bit in game 1, why it is optimal, or at least we think it is optimal to wall off in PvP. I think the way that AlphaStar defended it in game 1 is not perfect. Like, I technically think that you can open up with the 2 adepts that TLO did. He did quite a bit of damage. If you shade out with 2 more adepts after that, I truly believe that you can do enough economic damage that can truly hurt the opponent, where it almost becomes impossible to come back. I mean, the main reason, I don't know how this went for you, but, when I got contacted to get here, I was obviously very excited and had no idea what to expect. And I was like, man, I'm actually a bit nervous. Like, I don't know. What do you guys want from me? They're like, well, we ask you to come here to basically just observe and tell us whether or not this is good StarCraft.
Yeah.
I definitely think it was good StarCraft, but not perfect StarCraft.
Certainly. I would agree with you so far on what we've seen. I mean, it's very interesting to hear that game 2 was like a very quick carrier game, because we don't really see that. We'll have to check those replays out later, but I guess we are going to see. This game was chosen, of course, because it is an interesting game and strategically something that people will want to see. So
it's really interesting to see how late AlphaStar saturates their gases.
Yeah.
Which is actually pretty funny, because I think that the TLO actually a while ago, when we often get questions, right, whether we're a caster or a pro gamer, is like, what is the thing that I should focus on the most in the lower leagues. And one of the biggest mistakes that lower league players make is that they take their gases very early, not just in the main base, but in their second base, in their third base, in their fourth base. People take gases too early, and obviously if you take your gases too early, you mine less minerals, but you need minerals to technically create everything else. I think All-Star is maybe overdoing it with delaying it that much on one base. We like to think that this is not optimal, but hey, maybe the All-Star knows something that we don't.
Well, I mean, it knows something TLO doesn't know, that's for sure. So right now we have Alpha Star making a couple of Adepts, a couple of Stalkers over on TLO's side. TLO's play, to be fair, after that kind of little joke aside, it looks like professional play. You know what we're watching, like the placement of all the buildings, the way he's moving around with his units. This is what we would consider like a pretty standard Protoss versus Protoss opening.
I actually love this. The Adepts going through the middle of the map with shading.
Oh my gosh.
That's some pro level play.
That was...
If you talk about minor things, like if you don't do this, if you don't let that shade finish up, your Adepts will run straight into the forces of your opponent. They get A, revealed, they B, take a lot of damage, and C, you're at risk of losing one. That was a really good move.
You saw where the shade finished. The Adepts were in that tall grass area, and that's actually kind of a big deal. Like, you can't see them from outside, but they can see you. So that seems like it was a very expertly done move there by Alpha Star.
I love how it went up the ramp. It picked off one probe as quickly as it could. This shade is not going to accomplish too much. I wonder if TLO cancels that pylon. He does.
Oh! He actually
amazing.
waits because it is a pylon and sneaks in right there.
But unfortunately, this one is that its time is most likely limited. So TLO switching things up here, and he's going for the robotics facility. So perhaps a little bit similar to what Alpha Star did in game 1. And in general, in StarCraft 2, we like to say that if you're doing the exact same build as your opponent, defending is easier than attacking.
Now, Alpha Star is kind of doing what we saw in game 1, right? It's getting that robotics, it's getting a lot of Stalkers. I expect to see a Warp Prism made here momentarily.
Do you see the amount of probes that Alpha Star has in the main base? I mean, it is technically mining a few more minerals, but in StarCraft 2, we like to say that 16 probes on a mineral line is perfect. Technically, you mine a little more with 18, a little more with 20, and a tiny bit more with 22 and 24. But that difference is so small that you technically don't want to go there as a competitive StarCraft 2 player.
Yeah, it's very true. We normally try to, minimize the amount of extra workers you have on a base like that, especially if you're doing something kind of aggressive. Now, seeing the robotics bay being made, this helps your tech a little bit. It lets you make more sophisticated units like Colossus. You can get some upgrades in it. You can make disruptors. And while it's not completely unheard of to get it on one base, it's a very rare thing to see in a Protoss versus Protoss match.
True. I must say I love the decision to not commit to the attack, though. In the first game that we watched, the first replay as well that we casted, we saw clearly that there was weakness in the defenses of TLO, and then maybe Alpha Star sensed that. Alpha Star picked off a couple of units and eventually was able to squeeze out a victory. This time it seems that TLO is a lot more prepared. And then immediately we see the decision of Alpha Star to actually go for the expand as well. I mean, that is the way you want to play StarCraft.
Yeah, no, TLO right now looking very solid. He's playing kind of a defensive game, but, his economy is much stronger than what Alpha Star is at right now. He's getting into his Twilight tech after that Robo, so he can get kind of some more mobility and power into his gateway units. Looks like he is going to go for the charge upgrade, but right now Alpha Star is coming across the map with his Stalkers, but where is that Disruptor?
Yeah, I think they're just waiting at home. Okay, they're trailing a little bit behind, but perhaps this is just one of those moments where, as a player, you always want to be active. You don't want to sit at home too long. If you have units, you want to try to get some value out of these units, and it's not always about getting efficient trades or trying to get a massive advantage, because just being out on the map often keeps your opponent busy. If your opponent sees forces, there is a bigger chance they make a mistake.
Okay, here we go. He's actually coming up this ramp, uses that Disruptor shot. A couple force fields come out from TLO, and he actually does a very good job parrying this attack from Alpha Star.
Yeah, very risky by Alpha Star to go through a ramp like this. This is a very narrow ramp. A single force field can technically split this army in half.
Yeah.
These are not...
Whoa! Wow!
Low.
Yeah, very nice micro there by Alpha Star, guiding that in. Now, that Disruptor, it's a very high-tech unit. It does a lot of area of effect damage. So that little orb that you see come out of it, you can't shoot it often, but when it hits, it does a lot.
But this is what I meant. Normally we don't go up and down a ramp like this too many times because a single force field can shut this kind of movement down.
That's
If
right.
your army gets, split in half, you can technically lose half of it and not really get anything in return. So these are very risky plays.
Yeah, it really is coming up this ramp. Oh, another good hit, though. I mean, the Disruptor is getting some work done here for Alpha Star, who, once again, is super saturating his Nexus here.
It's definitely creating a pretty big advantage since it has been building probes non-stop as well. As our observer is showing us, the income right now on the side of Offstar quite a bit higher than the income of TLO. Even though the Nexus was later, it's been ahead in workers throughout the majority of this game. Wow, these Disruptor hits are becoming ridiculous.
Yeah.
TLO lost his entire army to these two Disruptors.
It's going to back up. I mean, TLO's economy looks like it's going to get a boost if he can live through this, but Alpha Star is just continually pushing in. He's even getting a second robotics at home, which is a very rare thing to see, but he's pushing right in.
The value of these disruptive shots doesn't lie, right? So,
Yeah.
might get a few more out. I think these are moments where technically Offstar could be even more aggressive because it's in an incredibly good position. It has picked off the majority of the forces of TLO. Of course, you want to be rather safe than sorry in general in StarCraft 2 when you attack, but these disruptive shots have done some phenomenal damage, and Alpha Star is actually in a tremendous position here.
Yeah, it's really interesting to watch Alpha Star just push in here non-stop, keeping that pressure on. Now, TLO has actually gotten a pretty decent set of units here together, so finally pushes him back down that ramp.
And once again, it's important to mention that this was played on what we like to call the BlizzCon patch. The Disruptor has changed quite a few times over the years, but this is still the Disruptor that shoots forward, what we like to call a Purifier Nova. But it will blow up as soon as it connects with a unit. So you have to be very careful, because if it connects with an enemy unit, but your own units are too close, you will end up losing your own units as well.
Yeah, it will destroy anything that it blows up on here. Now, continually pushing up this ramp. Alpha Star is having a very hard time with this small choke point. I see a lot of good redeeming things about his play, but this is one thing that no professional would really ever do, trying to get up that small choke.
That was a phenomenal disruptive shot there, but you're spot on, Dan. We are very worried in general to go up ramps, because once again, the force field is an incredibly powerful spell in Protoss versus Protoss. If you don't have Archons or Colossi, which are late game units, you can't really break force field. So we would normally be very, very hesitant to even think about going up a ramp like that.
Now, TLO is actually attacking into Alpha Star for the first time here. This Disruptor count has actually gotten incredibly high, though.
Yeah. It's also something that I think you normally don't want to push into. TLO getting very ambitious here. Obviously, did drop. That's a lot of observers. I mean,
Yes.
we have seen this once or twice in our life, but perhaps Alpha lost a couple games against Dark Templars against his. It's like, I want to make sure that never happens again.
Yeah. The observer that we see flying there that we were just looking at, it just detects anything that's invisible for you. There are some invisible units in StarCraft, and so you'll use this for that situation.
Or Alpha Star is telling us that F2 is the optimal hotkey to use. The F2 is the select all army hotkey. We have always a very divided opinion. Some players love it and some players hate it. Some players will say you should never use it, but technically if you press F2, if you haven't changed the hotkeys in StarCraft 2, you'll select all units at once, and that's often when you see 5 observers flying next to each other.
Well, Alpha Star is pushing up right now again. Just continuous blasts here from the Disruptors. And it almost feels like there's a little bit of sloppiness coming out of Alpha Star with the units. But at the same time, we don't have like the blink upgrade, which is very common to see in this situation.
I love that move. Offside just immediately recalling as soon as it realized that it was a little bit out of position. Oh, what's that? Okay.
Okay. Nothing to attack up there, but
No.
okay.
Those are not shots we would normally make, but I do like that move, bringing the army back home, knowing that TLO was in the middle of the map and trying to respond to it. So, man, it never stops with Disruptors. How many Disruptors do we currently have out on the map? 11 more.
11 Disruptors.
M. Canning would be so proud.
This is really kind of wild to see. Like, I have never seen a game that looked like this, and so far, Alpha Star actually has more supply. If you look at those numbers at the bottom, 152 of 181 against 116 of 133. So it's 155 supply against 116, which generally we look at that and just say, okay, that's a pretty decent advantage right there. You just have a lot more units on the battlefield.
It's been a really interesting game, this one, because it started off, you'd normally say, in a good way for TLO, but then Alpha Star really brought it back, had a couple of phenomenal trades, and now it just feels like we're in a phase in the game where we're looking at an amount of disruptors that we don't normally see in Protoss versus Protoss. I mean, disruptors are fantastic units, but you make 5, 6, maybe in some crazy scenarios you make 8. We see 13 right now out of Alpha Star.
And they're all moving around together as well. You know, there's definitely situations where you're trying to get sneaky with these units because they can do so much damage. But just keeping them together right now, Alpha Star definitely has a strategy and is sticking to it.
Meanwhile, we see TLO going for a couple of Zealots on the right top side, and at the same time also building Phoenixes at home. I do like this, because I think one thing that we have seen over the last 5-6 minutes is that Alpha Star often runs around with the entire army in one place. TLO is starting to take some advantage of this.
Yeah, that's true.
By, you know, making a minor attack on the left top side, sending a couple units to the right top side. Perhaps trying to make it more complicated for Alpha Star.
I like that TLO is definitely learning and adapting here. Getting some units that are actually very good against disruptors. Disruptors can't hit units that fly, so these Phoenixes are going to come around and lift the disruptors up and really cause a problem for them.
Needed Void Ray. A fake Void Ray, but yes, you're spot on. TLO is building a unit. Ooh. Gotta be very careful being aggressive. Once again, a couple of these forces of TLO do go down. I mean, supply-wise, it really doesn't look good. The numbers that obviously are next to the names, Alpha Star is close to having the biggest army possible in StarCraft 2. Not necessarily the most optimal army, because this is a pretty crazy composition, but you cannot go over 200 supply, so I guess you gonna have to
Alpha
attack
Star has done what we call maxing out. Alpha Star has maxed out his supply, and it's just a gigantic army, as you can see. Mostly disruptors. 134 army supply overall, so definitely feels like Alpha Star can win a battle at this point. 18 disruptors. Never have seen that in a pro game.
No, that is an insane amount. There's also a lot of Stalkers and no Blink upgrade. This is also not something we see at very high level StarCraft 2. This army composition, however, is incredibly strong, and I think TLO is in a world of trouble because a couple of Phoenixes... Ooh! Oh, no! Oh my goodness. Well, that's a way to not be maxed out anymore then.
Yeah, Alpha Star blows up a lot of its own units here. The Phoenix is coming in and lifting up so many of the disruptors that will cancel their shots as they come out. And it looks like TLO is going to take this battle pretty decisively.
But still down in supply quite a bit. I mean, that was an interesting battle. Alpha Star clearly one of these Purifying Novas of the Disruptor connecting with the own forces. Meant that TLO was going to get a better fight there because a lot of units went down before the fight. But I mean, now at the same time, Alpha Star is still getting a couple of phenomenal Disruptor hits off, and TLO simply doesn't have the amount of units anymore to really fight an army like this.
No, not too many. But TLO has taken the 4th base. I feel like TLO has done a very good job of economy management the way that we understand it as humans so far, you know, keeping that mining going. But Alpha Star just completely relentless.
Double Observer once again. As recall is being used on all these disruptors as well. +2. You know what I think is one of the most interesting things about this game? That the Alpha Star has not decided to go for Blink. A lot of Stalkers have been produced in this game. Oh, Blink actually finished off.
Yeah, just very, very recently.
Okay.
And that's something that you normally see on the pro level. You get Blink with your Stalkers. It makes you very mobile. Your Stalkers can kind of just flash to different locations like that we just saw.
Yeah. Okay, then it does make sense. But it was late, because during that first big battle, we didn't have it yet.
Yeah, it just finished.
We don't often see high-level games with 20+ Stalkers and no Blink upgrade. That's just something that we don't see very often.
Well, Alpha Star seems to be coming in once again with just about twice the army supply. It feels like Alpha Star is going to be able to take this game.
Well, not if it keeps blowing up its own units. But, I mean, the amount of disruptors seems like it's a little too much to deal with. But it's not an optimal composition, but it seems like these numbers don't lie. GG once again. Wow, then.
Wow, indeed. TLO, what are you thinking? These are three pretty drastically different games that you've played at this point.
Yeah, I think that was the main difficulty I have. I'm not a Protoss player, and when I was practicing, most of the humans I played against played very standard StarCraft, so that was kind of my knowledge base. Going into these games, none of these games looked like any of the games I played on ladder, so it was very tricky for me to counter that, because I assumed after the first match I'll probably have a good idea how to play against this agent. I did not. Every single game I was again in the dark, and I needed to come up with how to counter the strategy on the fly, which proved a little difficult for me, especially not being a Protoss professional.
I mean, the three of us, all we do is watch and play StarCraft, and the fact that none of us have really seen anyone play like this definitely kind of adds that crazy factor into it, where it's very hard to come up with that on the fly. But I got to know now, guys, Oriel, Dave, how do you actually train Alpha Star?
Yeah, so the process of training actually starts with something that I was describing at BlizzCon, which is called imitation learning. And what this means essentially is that we take many replays from you guys and many of you watching at home, and we try to sort of understand the basics of StarCraft through just essentially looking at a situation that a human is in and trying to imitate the best we can that particular move. So here we should see sort of how that kind of first step of the process happens. And that is what I showed at BlizzCon, that kind of almost V0 of Alpha Star, its inception, which uses, by the way, not only professional games, it uses 3,500 MMR and high. So really many of you probably have kind of helped in a way, train the first version. And then what happens next, Dave is going to tell us.
Okay, so we train Alpha Star using something we call the Alpha Star League. And the first competitor of the league is actually the neural network that's trained from human data, as Oriel just described. And then at each subsequent iteration, new agents are forked and branched from that previous agent and added to the Alpha Star League. These agents then play matches against other competitors in the league. And depending on what happens in those matches, the neural networks are updated by a process called reinforcement learning so as to defeat all of those different strategies as effectively as possible. In addition, the competitors are encouraged to specialize by adapting their personal learning objectives. For example, some of them might have preferences to play against particular opponents or incentives to build a particular unit type. And finally, at the end of the Alpha Star League, we select the least exploitable set of 5 agents out of the league. That's something we call the Nash of the league. And that's the 5 different agents that TLO was then actually playing against.
Oh, so he was actually playing against 5 different alpha stars that won an actual league where you had almost like just a huge amount of alpha stars playing against each other over and over and learning from each other?
That's right, yeah. So basically you can see this league as kind of the process in which Alpha Star learns the game, learns about worker rushes, cannon rushes. Some agents kind of maybe obsessed with a certain unit. That agent we saw was a bit obsessed with disruptors, as we saw.
And that was one of the 5 best.
Exactly. So then the cool thing is that then this kind of knowledge of all these agents that we've trained through time gets distilled into like this, what we call distribution over agents, in which then we would just kind of play a best of 5 or a 5-set game here. And what's important to also note is that the order was also randomized. So I said before, there's no adaptation between games. That means that we kind of look what are the 5 agents that stand out, and we kind of toss a coin, order them in some way. That's the way in which the player experienced them.
The Alpha Star League sounds awesome, first of all. So how long does the Alpha Star League run?
So the league here was run for about a week. So the first training process of supervised learning from replays takes about 3 days. And that gets you to perhaps a platinum level player. It's hard to estimate. And then the league itself, as I was saying, was run for 7 days.
Okay, and what does that mean, like if you would compare it to, let's say, us playing for 7 days?
Yeah, so 7 days of, real time is actually longer, slightly longer in kind of StarCraft. As Tim was saying before, we get a binary that can run the game quite much faster. So the most experienced agents we see today have played about 200 years of StarCraft 2.
Slightly.
200 years
Yeah,
of StarCraft 2.
yeah, it's a fun life.
I guess it is. I aspire to be one of your agents. Wow, that's... I'm kind of caught off guard there. I do want to ask you guys about, like, how many of these agents have really bizarre strategies? Because I feel like we've heard about one. We just watched one. The first one seemed kind of normal, but how weird are these strategies getting?
So the beautiful thing about the actual training process of the Alpha Star League is that it actually develops a whole diversity of different strategies over time. So you can think of this as mirroring the way that that professional players started playing the game of StarCraft when it was first released, that they would start off discovering one kind of strategy for playing the game, but then someone else would find like some counter strategy to that strategy, and that would lead to some new way to play the game. And over time, a whole set of different ways to play was kind of introduced into the ladder where pros were playing against each other. And we see something very similar emerging over time in the Alpha Star League, where it starts off doing really crazy things, you know, a lot of worker rushes initially, you know, zealot rushes, this kind of thing, and then over time developing more and more interesting strategies, such as some of the ones that we've seen.
Wow.
Is there another strategy that truly stood out for you guys? That I don't know, a funny story to share, maybe.
Maybe interestingly, sometimes very nice proxy strategies emerge. I'm not a StarCraft 2 professional player, so I cannot judge or whether these exist or not. But it's interesting that even when the agents are not incentivized to do a proxy, I mean, they just play just kind of to beat the league. We see that emerging sometimes. Then some other times it goes back to doing like phoenixes or like but that, I think the emergence of proxy plays is quite notable, and I'm sure in the replays you guys can kind of analyze and tell us if anything weird emerged that we just don't understand enough, probably.
Well, so far we've definitely seen some of that. You know, that's the last replay that we're actually going to watch of your series, TLO, but you did play games 4 and 5. Can you kind of go over them for us a little bit? Tell us about them.
Yes, of course. So game 4, once again, completely different from anything I've played against before, and as we know now, it's actually basically a different agent that I played against, which I didn't know in my matches. So, you know, countering what I did before wasn't very helpful. It played massive amounts of Plink Stalkers, and we saw some really nice Plink micro, and it basically just outmaneuvered my units. It did very human moves there as well. You know how usually you Plink away with Stalkers in a normal battle, but once you have more Stalkers, you Plink on top of the enemy army. Exactly that happened as well. And I actually had some DTs in my base as well. So
Very much like a human player.
yeah, very, very Protoss typical style. So I lost that game too. And in game number 5, I decided I identified a weakness in Alpha Star that it didn't scout very well. So my plan was to build a proxy pylon in the enemy base and go for a 4-gate. However, coincidentally, Alpha Star also decided to go for a proxy and put a proxy pylon in my natural and went for 4-gate. I went for 3-gate, but unfortunately my pylon was just 1 inch off and got scouted. And I had 3 gates, but my pylon got unpowered, and Alpha Star beat me with the proxy. It was really interesting that we both decided to go for the same strategy there. But yeah, it was a full sweep 0-5.
Wow. Well, again, you are actually a Zerg main race player. But having played this, and you're a very good Protoss player, there's no doubt about that. What are your overall impressions after having played these 5 games?
So even though I was defeated, I actually still felt very confident that if I would have more time playing Protoss, and if I would have more matches, that I would win a significant amount of the matches. Because even though I lost all of them, some of them were close, and I could identify some problems with it, and I felt if I would have another week to train Protoss, I would easily defeat these agents as well. So, you know, I didn't feel too bad about losing.
Okay. And for you guys, like, your agent beat its first pro gamer 5-0. You must be pleased with that. What did you think about the way that it performed?
Yeah, so it was an incredible just experience for the whole team to be, you know, in the room watching a pro gamer. I remember actually after the first game, he said, "Oh, guys, you've done it." So that was kind of a relief and just a kind of happiness moment. And then then every game after that was kind of a show that the approach we took was really working. At the same time, we realized, well, we won 5-0. Again, it's not obviously TLO's main race. He plays Zerg. As a Protoss, he's mid Grandmaster, so still extremely good. So we decided that was kind of we were celebrating.
We might have had one or two drinks involved in this little story, and we were celebrating and out with the team, and one thing led to another, and we started discussing and realizing that given that we had won 5-0, that maybe we didn't know the upper bound of how strong our agent really was. And that maybe it would be a good idea to actually get over someone who wasn't playing their off race and actually play them. So this is when we hatched the idea to go back to the office, press the green button and restart training on our agents and invite over a really top professional Protoss player.
All right. Care to spoil it for the audience?
Sure. So we kind of contacted TLO and we said, okay, we want to play a Protoss professional gamer, ideally, in the top 10 range of Protoss. And, as you might guess, because it's actually one of his teammates, he recommended that we play Liquid Mana.
All right. Well, I think it's time for us to learn about Liquid Mana. Thank you so much, TLO, for your participation here. It was fantastic. And let's go ahead and learn about Liquid Mana.
Mana can also go to the low ground. Oh!